What if one quiet afternoon, walking down the street in your worn shoes and hopeful heart, you were mistaken for a criminal, handcuffed, ridiculed, stripped of dignity in front of 100 watching eyes, not because of anything you did, but simply because of the color of your skin? What if you found out that no matter how hard you worked, how much you achieved, you could still be reduced to a stereotype with a snap of judgment? Today we unravel a story not of rage, but of reckoning, not of vengeance, but of silent fire, burning beneath every insult ever hurled at the wrong person. Stay with us, because this isn't just Maya's story. It could be yours. It could be ours. The patrol car rolled to a stop along the cracked sidewalk, its headlights slashing through the thick dusk, illuminating a lone woman, walking with quiet grace. Maya Freeman adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag, her navy blazer neatly pressed, but clearly inexpensive. Her shoes scuffed from miles, walked but still polished with care. Turner and Reynolds, two white officers bored and craving control, exchanged a look, a smirk pulling at Turner's mouth. Another one strolling where she doesn't belong. Turner muttered his fingers, drumming the steering wheel. Reynolds flipped on the flashing lights without hesitation, a silent declaration of war. They stepped out slowly, their boots heavy on the pavement, the night swallowing their movement. Maya paused, her hands visible, her face calm, but watchful. "Good evening, officers," she said, her voice even and respectful. Turner's eyes narrowed, reading her appearance like a crime scene. "License and ID." He barked no greeting, no explanation. Maya nodded slowly, reaching into her bag, her movements deliberate. Before her fingers even brushed her wallet, Reynolds lunged, grabbing her wrist with unnecessary force. "Got something to hide?" he hissed loud enough for the few passers-by to hear. Maya's heart pounded once hard, but her face remained composed. "I'm just walking home from work," she answered softly. Turner chuckled, the sound, sharp, mocking. "Work," he repeated with a sneer. "Sure, and I'm the president." They patted her down roughly against the hood of their car, the indignity public and deliberate. A woman across the street paused, but quickly looked away, the weight of history pressing down on her too. Nothing. Reynolds grunted, disappointed by her innocence. Turner wasn't satisfied. "Open the bag," he ordered. Without consent, without warrant, they dumped her belongings onto the sidewalk. A wallet, a paperback novel, a small key ring, the artifacts of a quiet life. "What's your story, sweetheart?" Turner jeered, towering over her. Maya met his eyes unblinking. "I'm just a citizen," she said, her voice low but unwavering. Turner snorted and without warning twisted her arms behind her back, snapping cold handcuffs around her wrists, resisting loitering obstruction. He rattled off, inventing charges like a magician, pulling rabbits from a hat. Maya stood tall, even as they forced her into the back seat, her dignity intact, while they stripped away everything else. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound final like a gavel in a courtroom where she had no jury, no voice. The cuffs dug into Maya's wrists as Turner gunned the squad car through empty streets, the city lights smearing past the windows like melted gold. Reynolds adjusted the rearview mirror to smirk at her reflection. "Still feeling special, sweetheart?" he taunted. Maya said nothing, her lips pressed into a firm, quiet line. Maybe she thinks riding back here's a free Uber. Turner laughed, his voice thick with derision. They veered sharply into a vacant parking lot, tires squealing, making sure her body jostled violently in the seat. "You better get used to concrete," Reynolds said, his eyes gleaming in the mirror. "Where you're going, that's all you'll see." Maya stared straight ahead, her mind building walls against their cruelty. They pulled into the precinct, parking across two handicapped spaces as if daring someone to object. Reynolds yanked the door open, grabbing her arm and hauling her out. Roughly, "Move," he barked, shoving her toward the entrance. Inside the station buzzed with lazy indifference. A few heads lifted, looked at her with casual disdain, then dropped again. "Got a loiterer," Turner called out to the desk sergeant, who barely glanced up. "Throw her in, holding paperwork later," he muttered, sipping burnt coffee. They marched Maya past rows of desks and cells, the smell of stale sweat and fluorescent despair thick in the air. Inmates catcalled and jeered, their noise bouncing off the tile walls. Reynolds pushed Maya into a small side room, a fingerprint station battered and grimy. "Empty your pockets," he snapped. Maya silently laid her wallet and keys on the counter. Reynolds snorted at the sight of the battered novel tucked between her things. "Bet you can't even read," he said with a cruel chuckle. Turner laughed loudly, clapping his partner on the back. "Come on, she probably thinks Shakespeare is a rapper." Maya stayed silent, each insult layering over her like wet cement. They fingerprinted her, roughly, taking photos, like she was a trophy they'd hunted down. "Smile for the camera." Turner sneered as the flash went off. Maya did not smile. She stood battered but unbroken as they processed her into the system, filing her into a place she did not belong because of the color of her skin and the cut of her coat, not the content of her character. The holding cell reeked of bleach and despair as Maya sat stiffly on the cold metal bench, her fingers raw from the too tight cuffs that Turner and Reynolds had gleefully tightened a second time, just for the spectacle. From beyond the barred door, voices echoed laughter, rising cruel and careless, as officers swapped stories of petty arrests like badges of honor. Maya closed her eyes briefly, shutting out the noise, willing herself not to shrink, not to crack, under the humiliating weight pressing down on her chest. Somewhere down the hallway, a siren wailed, a sound more fitting for someone truly dangerous, not a woman whose only crime was walking, while black and dignified. Turner strolled past the cell, whistling his keys, jangling against his belt, pausing just long enough to throw a smirk her way. "Bet you didn't expect this when you stepped out tonight, did you, sweetheart?" he drawled, tapping the bars lightly, as if she were some animal in a cage. Maya said nothing, her silence a wall he couldn't scale, but the effort not to respond trembled in her clenched fists. Another officer, a woman this time. Younger blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, passed by, and glanced in her gaze, lingering just long enough to absorb the scene, before she turned away, without a word. Complicity written in every step. Turner wasn't done. He sauntered over to the small intercom and pressed the button, his voice booming through the precinct speakers. "Attention all units. We've got a loiterer in custody. Repeat, loiterer in custody. Watch out, folks, she's armed with sass and a used library card." He laughed, the sound ricocheting through the building like a bullet meant for humiliation. More laughter followed, a hideous chorus, bouncing off the linoleum and metal, wrapping around Maya, like shackles she couldn't shake off. Her photo appeared on the station's internal monitors, a grainy black and white mugshot, framed by mocking captions, typed hastily by Reynolds at his desk. "Thug in pearls," one read. "Lost maid," another flashed cruelly. Officers passing by chuckled, snapping pictures of the screens with their phones, whispering to each other, as if she were a viral joke. In real time, Maya sat there stone still, her heart pounding a slow, furious rhythm in her ears. Outside the station, another squad car's siren blared. painting the building in intermittent washes of red and blue. Each flash a reminder of the badge-backed brutality, grinding her down piece by piece. Turner swaggered back into view, pulling a coffee from the vending machine, the steam rising between them like a curtain. Maya refused to acknowledge. "You'll be out by morning," he said, shrugging, "assuming you can find someone who cares enough to post your bail." His words slithered into the cracks of the night, poisonous and proud. A group of rookies gathered near the front desk, pretending not to stare, while one whispered too loudly, "Looks like another case of mistaken self-importance," setting off another wave of snickers. Someone outside the holding area whistled the theme from a minstrel show, an ancient mockery repackaged for the 21st century. The cameras installed for safety watched silently, recording injustice pixel by pixel. No one lifting a finger, no one thinking. Maybe this time was different. Maybe this time would matter. Maya looked down at her hands, the faint indentations from the cuffs, digging deep into her skin, her palms red and trembling from the restraint. But when she lifted her head, her eyes were molten steel. Across the station, Turner caught the look, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered in his smirk, something wary, but it was gone, almost instantly smothered by arrogance. "Smile for the camera, princess," he sneered again, as Reynolds lifted his phone to capture another degrading shot, oblivious to the tidal wave about to crash over them all. The sirens outside screamed louder, the city's heartbeat pulsing against the station walls. A storm gathering on the edge of the night, unseen, but inevitable, waiting for the moment when power would shift and masks would crumble. An older officer named Sergeant Collins leaned over the booking desk, scanning Maya's state-issued ID with a mechanical boredom that evaporated the second his eyes locked onto the name and title, embossed in gold. His fingers froze midair, pupils dilating as if he'd seen a ghost, and a sharp intake of breath escaped him loud enough to cut through the stillness of the precinct. For a moment he said nothing. Then he straightened slowly, his voice trembling as he called out, Chief, you need to see this." He didn't even hand the ID over. He just turned the monitor around for everyone to see. And there, staring back at them in undeniable government-certified authority, was the name, Judge Maya Freeman, Chief Justice of the Illinois Superior Court, the very woman assigned to preside over next week's historic trial, investigating systemic racial discrimination inside the city's own police department. The revelation detonated across the room, faster than a lit match dropped into gasoline. Phones buzzed with frantic internal messages, eyebrows shot up faces, blanched coffee cups tipped over unnoticed, the reality of what they had done, spreading like wildfire without mercy or pause. Turner stumbled backward 2 steps, his mouth opening and closing, his brain incapable of forming a coherent excuse. Reynolds looked physically ill, sweat pouring down his temples, despite the chill of the station's air conditioning. Maya stepped forward, her movement deliberate, her wrists still encircled by cold steel, her posture straightening like a queen rising from a battlefield. Without a word, she unclipped the handcuffs herself, with a smooth twist of the key, left carelessly on the desk, the metallic snap echoing louder than a gunshot. She pocketed the cuffs, her face unreadable, her eyes, 2 chips of glacial ice sweeping the room and silencing even the breath from their lungs. Calmly, her voice low but cutting with precision, she said, "Get me the police commissioner now." The command left no room for negotiation, no space for cowardice, no shield of bureaucracy behind which they could hide. Officers scrambled, their faces drained of all color, their hands shaking as they fumbled with radios and phones, knowing it was already far, far too late. No apology would be enough. No excuse would survive what was about to come. Judge Maya Freeman stood alone in the center of the chaos, dignified and composed, the embodiment of everything they had failed to see. A reckoning dressed not in rage, but in ruthless calm. The morning after Maya's release, the city awoke to a firestorm. No PR team could contain headlines, screamed across every major outlet. Judge Maya Freeman, handcuffed by racist officers. While news helicopters circled the police station, like vultures sensing blood. Within hours, the chief of police, red-faced and stiff, announced in a hurried press conference that officers Turner Reynolds and 2 others involved were officially suspended, pending a full internal investigation for misconduct, racial profiling, unlawful arrest, and excessive force. Their badges and weapons were confiscated, their names splashed across national television, their faces frozen in viral infamy, captured in screenshots from the very live stream that had once been their cruel entertainment. The live stream itself, recorded by a civilian who had recognized Maya during the arrest, exploded across social media, viewed over 20 million times in a single afternoon. Hashtags surged, justice for Maya, end racist policing, accountability, now flooding Twitter, TikTok, and every platform in between. Civil rights groups mobilized with a fury not seen in years. Mass protests erupted outside the police headquarters. Crowds waving banners, chanting Maya's name, demanding sweeping reforms, demanding that the rot festering inside the force be ripped out at the roots. News anchors dissected every frame of the video, analysts tore into every sneer, every mocking comment the officers had made. Commentators asked how many others had suffered like this in silence, without the armor of a public title to protect them. Turner's neighbors posted "racists out" signs on his front lawn. Reynolds's children's school quietly suggested they seek education elsewhere. Even their union reps struggled to defend them under the relentless crush of public fury. And through it all, Maya remained silent, steady her response not in words, but in action. A week later, she walked into the courthouse, head held high, robes flowing like a storm behind her, not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as the presiding chief judge over the very inquiry into police corruption and systemic racial abuse that had haunted the city for decades. Cameras flashed, but Maya didn't flinch. Protesters cheered, but she kept her gaze forward. In that courtroom, it was not just the officers who would be judged. It was an entire broken system, forced to finally confront itself under the piercing weight of truth. Every step Maya took was a verdict against the arrogance that had cuffed her. Every breath she drew inside that marble chamber was a declaration that dignity could not be erased, not by badges, not by bias, not by hate dressed up in a uniform. Justice was no longer an idea. It had a face now, and it would not be denied. Maya Freeman did not use her courtroom as a weapon for revenge. She did not raise her gavel to crush those who wronged her. Instead, she wielded her power with something far rarer and infinitely stronger: restraint and vision. She ensured that every officer who had humiliated her faced justice, but not through rage, through due process, through transparent hearings and undeniable evidence. Turner was stripped of his badge and sentenced for civil rights violations. Reynolds faced the same. Along with public disgrace and a lifetime ban from law enforcement, the city launched a full external review of its police practices, not because Maya demanded it, but because the people rose behind her, their voices now impossible to ignore. Maya didn't seek retribution. She sought restoration. She chaired new committees that rewrote training standards. She pushed for independent civilian oversight. She fought for funding into community-based policing models. And when politicians tried to water down reforms, she faced them on live television, her calm words cutting sharper than any accusation. Schools taught her case in history classes. Law students cited her rulings in papers. Activists held up her portrait at marches. A woman who had been mocked for her skin, her clothes, her quiet dignity, now stood as a symbol that shattered stereotypes and rebuilt faith in what justice could mean. But Maya didn't care for statues or headlines. She cared for the unseen victories, the teenager who now believed she could become a lawyer, the young black officer who chose empathy over arrogance because of her example, the mother who no longer warned her children to fear the system, but to one day lead it. On the anniversary of her public humiliation, Maya stood alone on the courthouse steps, the marble beneath her feet, warm from the afternoon sun, her black robes billowing softly in the summer breeze. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the past and the lightness of what was still possible. The city buzzed behind her, not with scandal, but with hope. She opened her eyes, the gold insignia of her judicial badge catching the sun, a quiet smile touching her lips. Not a smile of victory, but of something deeper, of peace, of truth, finally heard and honored. She had not become a symbol because she wanted to. She had become one because she refused to break a judge, a woman, a storm that reshaped everything it touched and left the world just a little better in its wake. Never forget how quickly a badge can turn into a weapon, how easily power can rot when it loses sight of humanity. But also never forget how a single soul, unbroken and unbent, can turn public shame into a movement, into memory, into change. Maya Freeman didn't seek revenge. She built a bridge where others burned walls. She showed us that real justice doesn't scream. It stands still and forces the world to listen. So the next time you see someone mocked, profiled, judged, without knowing, remember, you could be standing before a storm wrapped in silence, waiting to rewrite history, one heartbeat at a time, one truth at a time. And when that storm rises, there will be no shelter for cruelty.